All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Excess Succeed. This is Gearface. Very pleased, as always, to be joined by D. D, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's my pleasure.
Absolutely. Today, I'm very glad to have the confluence of this character and this expert recording today. We're learning about Wagner today, a character that I have a fun story about that I'll get to in just a moment. But before that, as always, we got a couple disclaimers. Number one, if I didn't mention it, this is Excess Exceed. This is a show where we are going to be talking about the Exceed character, Wagner. Welcome. Anyway, disclaimer number one is that we're going to be talking about playing to win on this show. That's not always the most fun thing to do in Exceed. Hopefully, it often is. But if the things that we're describing, the ways that we're describing that you should win with Wagner don't line up with a way that you think is fun to play as Wagner, please don't play that way. Play in a way that you do find fun. You'll have more fun doing it. Disclaimer number two is that despite what it may sound like sometimes, we don't know everything. I don't know anything. Do you know some things, as always? For brevity's sake, we're going to be talking as though we sort of do know everything. We're going to be saying, always do this, never do that. Take all that with a grain of salt. Exceed's not a solved game. You're going to have to develop your own lines of play with this character, and don't take everything we say, as completely set in stone. Really quickly, before we get going, I do want to share a quick story about this character and my experiences with Exceed as a young Gearface, just fresh in the community in early 2022. Undernight had just dropped as a set. I was a fan of Undernight, so I showed up in the community. At this point, no Excess Succeed, no mentor tournament. I was a
This
face
was
in
back
the
when
crowd.
you were a fresh, innocent, guiltless gear.
Exactly. Yeah. I was a completely innocent gear. Um, so at the time, I hadn't run this con yet where I got like 120 lessons of Exceed for free by stealing people's time and pretending it was a show. I just hopped into lobbies with people and asked them to play some games with me, like a regular person might do. And D's very good about teaching new players and drilling a couple games to show people the ropes. And I picked up Wagner as like an early character that I was interested in playing. D, I think this was probably the first time we spoke together, and I guarantee you don't remember this because I know that you do this with you've probably done this with hundreds of people at this point.
Terribly sorry, I have no recollection of it. Yeah, please
No,
continue.
good. That your lack of
Actually,
knowledge is
that's great because I
contingent
can't
on the
spoil the
story.
ending.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. So we played, I think, 2 games that evening. I played Wagner, I think, both times. I know I played Wagner for the first game. And for further context, these were my third and fourth games of Exceed ever. Very, very new to this. The second game, you played Super Skullman into me. That was my fourth game of Exceed ever. You trashed me, obviously. Do you have any idea who you played into my Wagner first?
I can guess characters that it wasn't. But
Give, give me some guesses.
well, so it wasn't Imogene, Brimless. It probably wasn't Natali. Guess it could have been.
You're correct so far.
Yeah, it was probably not anyone in season 5.
True.
I'm betting I played a season 6 character.
That is true.
And my theory is that I would have played Linne.
That makes a lot of sense, especially given that afterward, I continued to hang around in the community, so presumably we had a pretty good game. But as a matter of fact, this was
Oh
when you
no!
this was when you were developing some theories about Carmine, and you used me as a little bit of a test
Oh
subject.
no!
So that was a real welcome to the community moment.
What
Obviously,
have I wrong?
I got killed that game. This is Carmine. For people who don't know, Carmine is a character who is very commonly banned from competition. Um, I clearly liked the game a lot because I did continue to stick around after it. And to be honest with you, the skill gap between D and I was so great that I didn't perceive that I got beaten any harder when he was playing Carmine to when he was playing Super Skullman. But I did find out later on that Carmine is a something of a notorious character. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, no, my third game of Exceed ever was the character we're learning about today versus D's Carmine. So
Oh.
to properly ground everybody in the moment there. So D, I'm asking you in particular to teach me about Wagner so I can go back in time and warn my my young self what to do in that game. Please, for the sake of the
I
timeline, tell me a little bit about Wagner.
I understand. I thought you were going to finish that thought with, now we play the run back so that you can beat my
Gosh,
Carmine with your Wagner.
you are still so much better than me at this game, and it is still like I don't think that Carmine's got a balance patch since then. I'm not gonna take that chance. I probably won't take that chance once I finish the entire series.
That's fair. Well, a skilled Wagner can beat any car. Wait, no, that's a different
Yeah,
thing.
a
Anyway,
skilled Wagner,
um,
sure.
well, hopefully that's what you'll be at the end of this. Actually, what I hope you'll be at the end of this is somebody who understands Wagner, and then
Yeah,
skill will come as you play.
that's the hope.
All right, thank you for that anecdote. I'm gonna love that story every time I hear it because I feel like you might have even told this before, and I forgot that. I since then and now I forgot it, so I bet I'm gonna get to enjoy this anecdote, a third time, some months or years down the line.
I'll spring it on
Um,
you again at the appropriate moment.
yep, yep. This is the benefit of being so absent-minded is that I get to enjoy everything several times. All right, so this is Wagner, not Wagner. This is the first lesson that I learned about this character.
Okay.
Under Night players are correct. I went and looked at the actual pronunciation guide. It's Wagner. I don't know why. Um, that I won't question it. It's Under Night lore. You know. I'm not very familiar with the source material either, so I'm coming at this as this is a character that I learned in Exceed by playing Exceed, and that this is the character that I know. So anything that I say that rings totally nonsensical relative to source, it's because I didn't play source. I don't know what the character's like in source. I can't make comparisons easily.
Sure.
And normally that's the thing that I love to do, so I just kind of wanted to apologize to the Under Night fans out there who are looking forward to hearing about this character with respect to their source. I can't comment. I played about 30, 40 minutes of Under Night total. Um, and someday I'll play more, but like got a long list of things I want to play.
Sure. And
So
we certainly I don't want to delay the lesson on Wagner after you've played a little bit more on Night. I actually probably can provide a little bit of context for what Wagner's like in Source, if it comes up.
oh cool.
I played a little bit on Night. So if it's relevant, I can comment. But
Okay.
uh, I mostly think of Wagner as an Exceed character as well. So I think
All right.
that'll work just fine.
Cool. Okay. We're gonna start with character ability. This character ability is in fact character defining. I'm in contrast with some other remarks I've made about some other characters, notably Byakuya. This is not an occasional thing. This is something you should be looking at a lot. And it's great that we have this character on the other end of the table, because this is in fact another character who has an action movement, albeit with different implications. Um, so action close or retreat one, play a continuous boost from your hand or reveal a hand with none. In the most recent game of Wagner that I played earlier today, actually, I twice took the action close or retreat one and reveal your hands. You
Wow.
shouldn't expect to do that very often,
All
but
right. Was this a D game where you looked at your hand and you looked at the board state and you said this will be funny, or was this a
it
D
was
game
it
where
was
you
I
were
had
trying to win?
0 cards in hands, and then I had 1 card in hands, and in both cases I went, I would really rather be at range 2 than range 1.
Okay.
So I'm just going to step back 1 and show my opponent here I'm holding nothing. Or here I'm holding what was the second card? I think it was block, which is not nearly as safe. So maybe don't do that. But
Right. But
anyway,
I mean your point is well made that free movement is free movement. And
yes,
in Ryu's case, free is essentially free except for the turn you're spending. In Wagner's case, it might be at the cost of hand information, but hopefully you're also getting a boost that you
yeah,
want to play into play.
and almost every case it is free and better, right? So because the fact is, if you want to play a continuous boost and you have a continuous boost, then this is better than free. This is I get to move and also do something.
Right.
Um, and so therefore, when we go through the kit, I'm going to start by talking about all the continuous boosts and how they interact with this, because there are some interesting interactions worth noting here.
Okay. And
Um,
and presumably, if you don't want to move, that's no problem. We have a universal game action for that. It's called boosting.
yeah, as it happens, you can just play a continuous boost and be like, all right, I'm good here. This is fine.
And in Undernight in particular, obviously, like there's no play a special or ultra continuous boost from your hand. This works for the normals too. There aren't
Yes,
that many continuous boosts among the normals to choose from. I think you've got respect and you've got
3.
superior.
There are 3.
Oh,
Yes,
oh yeah, yeah. This is a continuous boost. I forgot because it causes
it
a
is
strike.
often. Yeah, Um, yeah, these are the three continuous boosts among the normals in the season 6 normal set. And they are notable in that, yes, these two together, in fact, mean close or retreat 1 and strike with +3 armor and after lose all armor. So you have a way to move and strike.
Okay.
Which is also a thing I did in the game earlier, but whatever. I'm not here to talk about specifically that game. Just like, yeah, in fact, sometimes move 1 and strike is what you need. And although it isn't literally move 1 because it is close or retreat, not advance or retreat, so you can't move over the opponent. Move and strike is something that can throw a lot of people off if they have you at the range that they want you at, and then you move to a range they didn't want you at.
Sure. We have another whole boost for this called Mix Up. That's a pretty good boost.
Yep.
That having kind of fuzzy positioning where you can be where your opponent doesn't expect you to be is valuable enough on its own, even without an armor rider on it. Sometimes.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, it is a potent tool in the kit of every Under Knight character. And it's important that they have things like that because the amount of movement and action compression and general resource utility they get is kind of how they offset the stronger set play found in other seasons for the most part.
Right.
All right. Which, by the way, set play is a term that doesn't quite make sense to fighting game players because we've co-opted it and bashed it into something else. I just mean setup, right? So a character who wants to spend time setting up something big and cool. And Wagner is a bit like that. I tend to think of her as being on the defensive side of the spectrum, somebody who is kind of building up sort of an install, accumulating strength, but still not to the extent that you would see in, for example, Street Fighter with a character like Chun-Li or Akuma.
Or, for example, our test dummy
or
here,
even
Ryu. Yeah.
Yeah,
Not paying any attention to what is on these cards other than a colored number. I'm not seeing anything other than maybe the +3 armor or defend that has as many number as Ryu has.
Yeah, we're not seeing a lot of +2s. We're not seeing any +3s, and we certainly don't see any +4s other than the one that's purely defensive stats.
Right.
Which is 1 armor, 3 guard. So your boosts are not individually amazing. So you should expect to be taking advantage of your ability to make it so that you are doing, a good boost and something else at the same time. I'm not going to run through just to make sure, because the baseline level of playing Wagner has 2 parts, and the first part is just understanding how to use your ability at all. So let's talk a few very, very fundamental things. This now reads +1 speed, now move up to 2.
Yeah. Because this could be move 0, because you could move forward and back or something like that.
Right. You can in fact say I'm going to retreat and advance. Notably, if you're here, you still can't get here because you have to close first, then resolve the boost. So it's close or retreat, then advance or retreat.
Got it.
So you can end up here, but you can't end up here. But that means you have a +1 speed, for the most part, move up to 2, which is a pretty hefty amount of positioning for no cost at all.
Sure.
And it gives you a speed edge, which is obviously great. So typically we'll use that to go to range 2 or 3 and say, hey, now I have more speed than you, and I'm at a range where mid speeds are a threat. So please be afraid of my dive or my spike. That's the first most obvious button you press. Here is the second, probably equally obvious actually, which is if you're at the range you want to be, but you're not comfortable with your opponent being at that range at the same time, then you retreat and you play this, and now you're at effectively the same range, but they're not.
Oh, sure, right. Because so you are effectively this almost reads as Swift. This almost reads as +1 power, +1 speed.
Right.
But
you say I'm going to retreat, and now I still hit you at the same range, right? Like if I want to play grasp here at range 1, I have a speed 7 grasp, but I retreat and lose this, and now I have a speed 7 grasp that hits at range 2 for 4 power.
Right.
And it also lets me do, things I otherwise could not do, like hit with dive from range 2. Because I jump over and then I close 1.
Right, and then you close 1, sure.
Yeah, it does not let you hit with spike, because from this positioning you would close 1 and miss. So,
right.
Still be aware of your limitation. But it's a tremendously flexible, powerful tool. So these are your 2, the term definitely isn't bread and butter, but they are 2 boosts that you will very often be happy to play just because they do what they say. And if you put a few moments of thought into how to use them in conjunction with your ability, they'll be great. And you just kind of have good neutral. And those two boosts kind of alone hold that down to a great extent. If you need more than that, please also consider Superior, which reads my attack is EX, and also I am one space off of where you thought I was. So if you were ready for something, you're probably not ready for the next thing. Now, of course, that gives up a copy of Cross, and a lot of people should be concerned about giving up your copy of Cross. I will say you do have a Speed 6 Range 2 special. So you have another thing that has the same speed as Cross at the range that is relevant, albeit it does not have the safety of Cross. So
Right.
if you absolutely need to have a Cross to get away from somebody with a, I don't know, 12 power suite, okay, maybe don't
Maybe
do
be
that.
careful with that superior.
Yeah. Um, but there are even other tools that you have for that because you can in fact just beat a sweep if you feel like beating sweep. We'll come back to that when we come to attack shapes. Like most characters who have a decent boost game, your attacks are mainly tools. They're not, in my opinion at least, they're not awesome in general purpose. They are good in narrow cases. And so learning how to use them in the cases they're good in is the third step of Wagner play. Next, lest we forget, this is a continuous boost. It's often played like a run where you just move up to 3 toward the opponent. But because it's continuous, it can in fact be a, move up to 4. Or in cases where your opponent has you cornered, you can step past or close 1, then get farther out of the corner than they expected.
Sure.
So combining that movement with your ability just gives you extra movement. Like this being aware of these, this is very much the fundamentals of Wagner play, where you go, okay, I have something that I kind of want. Can I make it something that's much better? And these 4 boosts are your main tools for doing that most of the time.
I mean, just with these boosts alone and combining it with my character ability, we've had conversations about Undernight characters. The one I'm specifically thinking of was my lesson with Rose on Linne, but in a general trend across the season, Undernight characters have some difficulty ending the turn without striking, it seems
Yep.
like. And
Yeah.
you've just, I mean, 2 of these were normal boosts, but you are, and I mean, the fact that you mentioned just defense as being in particular a way that you can move and strike. There are characters in Undernight who like that's how they're always ending their turn. They don't have any other
Mhm.
options but to strike on their turn almost. So Wagner, it seems like, has, by the standards of Exceed, good neutral. By the standards of Undernight Exceed, very good, or at least very like traditionally good neutral.
Yeah.
That good neutral by the standards of other seasons of Exceed.
Yes. Yeah. That is exactly my point. Is that I think Wagner can hold down has stable neutral in the context of Exceed as a whole, and has great neutral in the context of Under Night
Okay.
because you in fact can pass the turn to your opponent and be winning. And most of Under Night just doesn't do
Yeah, they can't do that. They're
that.
passing the turn to the opponent when they absolutely have no other choice to, or to gain what they think is a more important advantage than the turn.
Right. It's like you want to make the most out of your turn because you're going to lose in their turn, and that's just how life is. That's how everything works.
Right.
And Wagner, to a significant degree, is able to say, actually, I'm going to make sure that my opponent can't get a leg up on me. I'm going to, get a leg up on them first.
Yeah.
Uh, which, yeah, perhaps not coincidentally, Wagner and Byakuya both, I think, have strong defensive utility. With Byakuya, way more intense, but with Wagner, it's represented in this state of just actually you can kind of always have the position you want and a little bit of a stat edge and
A little something
you know
extra. I'm not
a
seeing,
little something.
again, having skimmed through the boosts, I haven't seen anything that looks anything like Soul's Oath.
Yeah,
We're not looking at something that is like, I press this boost and now I'm winning neutral for the
yeah,
foreseeable future
yeah.
almost.
The closest analog is this, but this is something where the opponent can just go to range 1, and now you just you have a +1 power boost and before close, which is nice because sweep catches cross, and
Sure.
that's good, but it's not amazing.
Right.
Not like as I said, not in the category of Soul's Oath, but that's fine. You you're also uh, less. You have to deal with less deck than Byakuya, and that is itself a nice thing. Where you just have a 30 card deck, your deck is normal. Yeah, 2 copies of every card. Nothing special there. Um, this is a feature. This means you
Right.
get to see
Right.
the cards
This
you want.
isn't a downside for Wagner.
Yeah, it's a downside for Byakuya, but this is not a Byakuya lesson. We did that anyway.
Sure.
All right, and I guess I would be remiss not to note that this is just defense. Sorry, not just defense.
Right.
Um, That's a different boost.
This is
But
simply defend.
yes, it is merely defend, which is a classic normal boost from Spike in seasons 1 through 5, which is +1 armor, +3 guard, which for the most part says like, hey, my assault doesn't get stunned by grasp or even by your assault. So if I play this and then you assault into me, I can assault into you and steal advantage back. That's like the most obvious interaction that creates, which is also the most obvious way of saying I'm passing turn to you, but it's fine because I have something I can play that will work no matter what you do. Uh, yeah, doesn't do anything special like the others. You'd like, as far as movement is concerned, as far as thinking carefully about what it means to be at what range. Mostly this just is, okay, I'm probably going to go to range 1 because at range 1, assault hits most things unless my opponent has room to cross. Um, but yeah, this has another important utility that I'll talk about when we get, which I guess now we're getting into. The second Wagner thing. So level 1 is just understand your neutral. Like play some Exceed, play some classic neutral, move around and be a little bit better than the opponent in a lot of positions. The next thing, the next phase with Wagner play, I guess, the next thing to understand that I think is kind of a requirement for playing her is these. Please read the text that is the same on these attacks, which is to say that the attacks have the same text.
You may set this as your attack face up from your boost area. If you set it any other way, it is invalid. After seal this.
Same on both of them.
Yep.
All right. So 1 has a very unreliable shape. It's range 3 to 4, speed 1, no movement, no nothing. So like actually loses to a ton of things. Just as this very specific kind of anti-fireball at range 4. Sometimes
at ranges exactly 3 and 4, you can really make your opponent want to play assault or dive.
Yeah. Its main value is in not being played or just in having 3 armor when you really need it. The other one, on the other hand, is a nice on-curve 6 power, which could in fact have more power than that pretty easily if you were to combine it with any of your various boosts, or more speed than that, depending on what you're doing. And now that you've read the text and the attacks, please do read the text and the boost, which is not quite the same, but very similar.
Sure, you've got +1 power and +1 armor, and both clean up if you were not stunned, sustain this. So this is her, and for the Undernight fans, this is her sword and her shield. This is her equip installs.
They're literally names: sword, shield,
yep.
flame brand, and so.
Yep.
So it's her, and at least as again, I don't know the source, but this is your install. This is your gearing up, and you want to have these in play for almost forever. So this is the part where Wagner play gets hard, and where, like, depending on your level of experience as a player, you may struggle, because there's a thing, I think I described this in the Carmine lesson. I don't remember when else I described it, but if you can look at a board state and determine unequivocally, here's the thing I can play that cannot be stunned by anything.
Yeah.
That is a really valuable skill to make these work. Because ideally, you want to have approximately +1 power and +1 armor for the entire game.
Okay.
Now I say +1 and +1 instead of +2 and +2, even though you have 2 copies of each, because your opponent has 2 copies of a card that says discard a continuous boost from play, and they will use it.
These are that powerful that techs are going to be reserved for a +1 power and a +1 armor boost.
If they are not reserved for this use, then your opponent has made a desperate decision or has forgotten about them.
Okay.
In most cases, or they like got one out of your hand some other way, so they know one's down, so they don't have to worry about like as many.
Sure.
But generally, if these hit the board, the opponent needs to get rid of them either by stunning you, which you should make as difficult as possible, or impossible if you can, or by just removing them from play by saying actually no.
Right.
Because there's a lot of board states where you can say I have +1 armor for the rest of the game. It just makes it hard to get an edge on you because your armor is not really liberally spread out among a lot of characters.
Over the course of an average game of Exceed is 10-ish, 8 to 12-ish strikes maybe. If you can get that amount of value out of this boost, you probably just won the game off of that. That's not getting hit by an incredibly strong ultra.
Yeah, the life delta it makes up, and it it's not necessarily. It doesn't help in the strikes you win. It helps in the strikes that you lose or trade, whereas this one helps in the strikes you win or trade, right? Like, they have slightly different dynamics in terms of when you get the value out of them. But the amount of value it provides can be very significant. It is also worth noting, just there's a really valuable and obvious breakpoint here, which is if this is in play, this is 7 power.
Yep.
Um, 7 is enough to stun sweep, and at range 2 on curve 7 kind of murders everything that isn't named focus. And if you actually, you know, put a little something extra on it, then you can have it be above curve at range 3, where it catches cross and stuns focus, or you can have it just be 1 2 8 7, which is a stat line.
That is
Um,
an unbelievably good stat line for 2 gauge. I guess 2 gauge and a pretty good boost, a pretty important boost that you are giving up for the privilege of doing that. But that's a lot of value.
yeah. The main balancing factor in actually playing this attack is the fact that once you play this attack, it's gone forever. This is after seal this, so assuming you don't get stunned, which if you're playing it, you shouldn't be.
Right.
You hit them for a bunch of value, a bunch of damage, and now it's gone forever. Not only is the boost gone, but the attack is gone. You can't use it. You only
Right.
have
It means
2
you're
copies
not
of it.
getting any
So
gauge out of it either. You have
no
no
gauge.
way to
Yeah,
get this boost back.
yeah. Like that is the inhibiting factor that prevents this from being something that would just be the only thing you do all game. Um, because you really would want to play this 4 times if you could.
Yeah.
And if it went to gauge, then hey, you would have even more gauge to be able to do it even more.
Right.
Because you don't really struggle for gauge to begin with.
I mean,
Um,
the fact that this is such a narrow attack in terms of use cases, is that actually almost kind of a good thing because I'm not going to be tempted
yes,
to give up my +1 power very often.
correct. Yeah, yeah. You're gonna have this in play, and if you get this in play at the same time, the opponent will get rid of this one because this is the attack that they want to not get hit by.
Sure.
And so very often you'll be able to say, okay, I'm just gonna have +1 power for like most of the game. And depending on when the other copies come out, you might get away with having +2 power for a lot of the game.
Yeah. Yeah, and I
Um,
mean, like when we've talked about tech tech boosts in or tech targets rather, parry targets, ukemi targets, and any sort of this is your this is the thing that your opponent is going to deny you from having.
yeah, so-called
Uh,
tech bait.
yeah, tech bait. Thank you. It's like I've done. It was like I haven't done 95 of these lessons, D. I managed to forget that one.
Well, tech bait
Um,
is jargon, so it's good to be very explicit. Like, well,
Definitely.
what we're talking about is
Um,
the thing that your opponent wants to get rid of.
yeah. On our training dummy here, tech bait is Way of the Warrior, is +2 speed,
100%.
+2 power, which is way flashier and more impressive and more eye popping and way easier to see. Oh, I need to get rid of that now because I can't do anything about it. And a
Mhm,
lot of times, tech bait or parry bait has that flavor to it. This is seemingly much more modest until you are able to until you're able to use it turn over turn over turn and kind of get this incremental advantage. So
mhm,
the point of comparison that I make that you made earlier to the Carmine lesson, for people who haven't seen it, please watch that lesson. It's wonderful. But D began that lesson by saying the first thing you have to understand as Carmine is that you can't be stunned. Is not to be stunned when you have a setup in place because that's how you lose games. That's like rule number one with Carmine.
mhm.
When Wagner has these boosts in play, am I treating it with that amount of uh like is my
It's not the
judgment
same
call
level of. It's not the same level of gravitas. It's not as essential. That's why I said like here's half of your Wagner play is
okay?
understanding how to use these. It is okay to say I'm going to clobber my opponent for trading up by 2, 3, 4, and then get reactively stunned. It's okay to say that my assault hits their sweep and I hit for 6 and they hit for 4, but they stun me.
And I
You
lose
have
these
that kind of
boosts.
trade. Yeah. Ideally, you want to pay them out in a way that is numerically good for you.
Right,
Like the usual payout being just this, where you go, okay, I'm just going to chunk you for a bunch of damage. And if they play focus, cool. They took 5, you took 4. You did get stunned. This goes away.
right.
But also, you did 5 damage through a focus.
Yeah, yeah, and
Um,
that's worth it. And hopefully that was after one or two other strikes where you were able to get value out of this. Now you're really winning. Now you
yeah,
actually have if you've paid
yeah,
out and also have gotten some incremental value where you didn't get stunned beforehand, that's
yeah,
great for you.
yeah. What you don't want is to play this and then next strike you get stunned. So
Got
you
it.
want you want to make sure that like you're going to get more than one strike of value, which asterisks and everything. Where it's like, well, if it's the right strike and they die, then sure. But generally speaking, you want to play these and not go, well, I sure hope I don't get stunned. You want to play them and go, well, it is either impossible for them to stun me based on what I have available, or only through extraordinary measures can they ensure a stun. Um, the existence of things like scramble and reading and the amount of aggression present in seasons like 5, 6, and 7 means that you might not be able to be 100% safe, but it's also less and less essential that you're 100% safe, especially when the stats include armor, which just helps you mitigate your losses more often.
So I should treat these similar to other things that care about boosts that care about being stunned, like Guile Shades, for example. I remember way back when we did the Guile lesson. Our metric for success with Shades was if you got 1 or 2 strikes worth of value out of them, out of the critical component in particular. That was enough. That was you can when you're evaluating your play afterward, you can say that it was probably an okay thing that you played Shades in that situation. Similar idea here. Getting a modest but pretty decent amount of value is expected and good enough for what we're putting down.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
And you should fully expect that you will not you just won't get to play all 4, or rather I should say that 2 of them will be immediately discarded. Your opponent will just knock them out of play, and that's fine. So again, it's one of those your expected value is for 50% of the game, maybe more like 30 to 40% of the game. And by that I mean the number of strikes in the game. You're going to have about +1 power and +1 armor, not counting any of the other boosting and neutral that happens. Okay, cool. That's an edge. That's a little bit that you can work with.
Sure.
And when you can make those numbers really stupid, then you make them really stupid. But you won't always have that opportunity. It is also fine to just say, okay, I will have these, and I'll play a focus, and they'll play a cross, and I'll take 0. Sure, I got some armor value. Now they're at range, and now I can jump in and threaten them with I don't know, like a speed 6, power 6, range 2, special or something, or this. Relatedly, by the way, just to make this explicit, the potency of this threat means that you should not dip below 2 gauge until this threat has been exhausted. Like, you don't have to work super hard to get your early gauge because trades will happen, block exists, there are on-curve things. Don't feel like you have to gun it for the first 2 gauge, because this is totally fine to exist in the mid-game threat, and you may not even draw it in the early game. Like, that's fine. But just make sure you keep this threat alive.
And because this threat is literally face up, both when I actually choose to use it, but also when it is on the board, my opponent does know that I can play this, and I can play this now and only now when I have it boosted.
Yep.
That this boost, Ancile, sounds way less threatening when I have fewer than 2 gauge to turn this into it sounds way easier to just punch me in the face and accept the fact that I have 2 armor when they know that I can't just do this to them.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, fairly commonly I will not put this boost into play until I have 2 gauge. This one will come out kind of whenever I want, because having +1 power matters for a lot of breakpoints. And I'm not really planning on playing this attack.
Yeah.
There are cases where it's a thing to play, but not very often.
Right. And we in some ways we can't really do our standard booster attack game with these cards because you need to boost them in order to attack with them.
Right.
But there is a similar dynamic here where giving up the boost for the attack is actually a real commitment, and I should be careful with it. Maybe slightly less so for this card. Are there situations where just the situation is going to require me to spend these as force, or am I avoiding that as desperately as I possibly can?
You should expect to not need to spend these as force pretty much ever. It's not impossible that you'll be in a dire situation. If you have no gauge and you have 3 cards in hand, and 2 of them are an ultra, and the last one is something that is completely useless to you at whatever range you're at. Okay, yeah, probably it's a change cards 5 turn. Like,
right.
But sometimes you're in dire straits. By default, these are not cards that you spend as force.
Okay.
You would rather say, I'm going to put this +1 armor on the fields, and even though it's numerically inefficient, I'm going to trust that I'm going to get at least 2 armor out of it, and then probably more like 4, and then I'll have this attack to threaten and so forth.
Right. And that speaks to what sounds like a kind of a developing play pattern for Wagner, which is that she has the ability to pass turn fairly consistently. And that means that her card draw is going to be like she can play neutral. She can slow things down and play neutral at a pace that allows her to draw into some cards and not lose too much tempo doing so. So, like, I might not actually be under the gun that much to do a big change cards action outside of desperate situations because I can just kind of play neutral and get my cards. Is that true?
Right. Yeah, you can you play a boost, you move to a range that's good for you, you have some stats, and you go, okay, I'm comfortable responding with whatever they do. If they strike, you respond and you're comfortable. If they try to contest, then you are back to neutral. They're probably spending more resources than you because you have free movement. That is kind of the whole point of your character ability.
Right.
And fairly often you'll also be able to just say, okay, this is a turn that I can change cards or prepare or such because I have a boost that I got to hide behind, or because I'm holding something that's like a focus or a sweep, and I have +1 armor, and that's fine. Even if it's not as important that you are winning trades if you are consistently getting armor off of this because you lose them by less.
Right.
Which means there's a lot of cases where you'll have something to sit on that you wouldn't normally be excited about, but you'll find acceptable. Let me actually use that as a segue into attack shapes, unless you have something
No,
that
yeah,
you
I
want
was
to
actually
follow up
about to
with.
say acceptable over a long enough period of time. It can snowball, and it sounds like that is sort of Wagner's game.
Yes,
So yeah,
you'll get a few big
I feel
chunks,
like
but for the
the
most part, you're
transition
getting
into
increments.
attack shapes is very well timed.
Yep, just as planned.
Sure.
All right. So we'll start with these two attack shapes because these are the ones that are kind of the emblem of acceptable. This thing has 4 printed guard, and you might have 1 or 2 armor on it, which means it's a very good way to not get stunned. It's really depressing to think of this card in that vein because this attack is awesome to hit with. Um, this is actually a little bit like a
Yeah,
certain special called Donkey
this is
Kick.
very
Yep,
donkey kick. Yeah,
it is a Donkey Kick. It is a big ol' attack. Hits for 6, speed is 4, which is not bad to start with. And if you put any speed on it, then it becomes on curve at 3. And because of the movement effects, it actually beats sweep and focus. EX Buck and Rotor just doesn't lose to anything, barring I suppose cross and leaving.
sure.
Um, so this attack is awesome. Uh, you might still be willing to play it to not get stunned if you have, at least 2 ultras in play and you don't have a better way to not get stunned. Uh, that's okay. Don't feel guilty about it. It's acceptable. So that's where I'm starting here. It's just things that are acceptable to play because you need to make sure you're getting your incremental value off of these.
Sure. And
Uh,
I mean, if you are playing this to not get stunned and you accidentally hit for 6 power on top of it, that's pretty good.
that's a very good day. Yeah, it's fairly hard to hit with it on accident. Um, but it definitely can happen if the opponent tries to throw something cheeky, and then you kind of
Sure.
look up and you go, oh,
But but
actually,
but
your projectile was only speed 3.
a range 1 or a range 4 or something whack and rotor
Yeah, those
in
are the cases
order
that I usually play it in
yeah, in
to
order
knock it
to
off.
not get stunned is tragic, but you are willing to do it.
Yeah, yeah. At range 2 to 4, I usually play it to hit. And if 4 sounds confusing, um, that's my range 4 Black and Rotor. It's 7 power with before close 1 at range 4.
Yeah, that
Uh,
sounds pretty good.
yeah, it is. Um, at range 1, I will still play it if I need to not get stunned and I have at least 2 Ultra Boosts in play, and I'm confident that I'm not getting swept unless they're both armor, but typically
Right.
I'll have 1 of each.
Right.
Um, then I go, okay, well, I just need to not get stuns. And also the retreat tends to actually benefit you at that point if the opponent is staying at range 1, or going to range 4. But usually if they're staying at range 1, then the retreat puts you at range 2, and that's a good range for you, as we'll see in a bit. Oh, look, it's in a bit. Here's a range 2 card. So this and your Ultra are both speed 6, range 2, pretty chunky damage. It is range exactly 2, does not hit at range 1, doesn't hit at range 3. And it has a very curious utility, which I think I alluded to earlier, which is to say that at ranges where this doesn't hit, mostly 3+, you can still play this attack and say, hey, I'm speed 6, and at speed 6, I'm gaining +1 armor and +3 guard.
Oh, to make it harder to stun you.
Yep, exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah, not foolproof, of course. You can get spiked, you can get swept, depending on the total number of stats you have. I have, in fact, played this with 2 armor and then said, actually, I didn't really care about getting swept, I only took 3. But you should usually be expecting to play this at a range where you are going, okay, well, they're throwing a projectile at me. Shrug. I will put this into play at speed 6 and have a bunch of defenses, and then next turn I will move forward by playing some other boost from my hand with my ability.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
so that's the peculiarity of this utility.
interesting. So specifically, like it's printed on the card that it would be like if Cross had a range 3 or 3+ rider that says like you probably just dodge the attack. Like
Yes.
it's demonstrating its own use case with the text on it. It's also just an attack and hitting. You alluded earlier to having something at range 2 that is speed 6. That means that I could conceivably play superior more often. But the excitement in your voice when we were talking about this card as an attack that you're trying to hit the opponent with versus the excitement when you were talking about the attack to hit the opponent with this, there's a big difference here.
Yeah, it's good, but to be honest, I don't usually like put a high value on this as my range 2 threat because I have this to be my range
Sure.
2 speed 6 big dumb damage. Where I say, you know, I could hit for 6 with this +1 power, or I could hit for 7, and I would rather hit for 7.
Yeah, 7 is a way better number in Exceed than 6. And also, just incrementally, it's higher by 1, and that's cool too. So I should
Yeah,
mostly treat this as a way to not get stunned.
yeah, it has another very notable use, which is that the EX is real stupid. Because you now have a DP, a reversal, a range 2 speed 7 that also does an unholy amount of damage.
Sure, yeah.
Um,
A DP that hits that hard and you'll often have some power on top of it is remarkably hard to stop.
yeah, but like played raw, I usually mostly think of this as something that I get utility out of at greater ranges, not something that I'm really excited about hitting with at range 2. I would rather do other stuff at range 2.
Okay.
Because
And
I have a lot of other stuff.
the EX attack use case also, I mean, like defend is defend, and that's a cool boost, and we might be using it occasionally. And the option to not get stunned at range is pretty good. But if everything's going my way and I'm feeling, I'm playing neutral with my other cards, neither of those things sound incredibly high priority for me. Is this a card that sometimes you'll hold for long enough to just kind of luck into the EX and be able to throw it that way?
Seldom, and your line of thinking is correct with one caveat. This becomes really hard to stun by anything.
Sure.
And so I will often throw defend out as a way to bolster a sort of flagging position where I'm like, okay, I'm starting to run low on things that I'm sure won't get stunned. Well, defend fixes that pretty darn well.
Sure.
So in most cases, that happens before I ever draw the EX.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. You'll be able to if you're bad position, you're cornered. Defend dive is going to be fine.
Yep.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah. It's also fine to do something like that and then say defend assault where, I'm still getting at least 2 delta off of these. I'm still getting an extra sorry, jargon. Delta meaning the difference in life that is between me and my opponent. So every point of power in armor that matters is +1 delta. So I'm like, all right, I'm getting some value out of this. I'm getting some value out of this.
Yeah. I've
Reactive
traded
stun,
remarkably well. That was good enough use for these boosts to maybe now be stunned.
right. As
Cool.
long as it wasn't literally the only striker that happens,
Right.
But
Right.
presumably they've been in play a little longer.
Makes sense.
Yes. So these are kind of your good enoughs. Unless I forget, technically, yes, there's an attack on this. The attack has 3 armor, 3 guard, and like as I said earlier, the main reason I play this attack is because of its defenses. Usually just the armor, but 3 armor, 3 guard, not a lot stuns.
Yeah.
At least at baseline.
Watch out for Spike.
Yeah, don't get spiked.
Yeah.
If I'm playing this to not get stunned, it means probably I have another copy in play. Like I have 2 already because I want to save 1. And it probably means that I have this in play. And we're at range 1, and I think my opponent's playing something fast. And I'm just saying, well, you can hit me with grasp, I guess. Here I have 4 armor. Put me at range 1 or 2, and then it's my turn.
And it sounds like, I mean, it's probably worth being explicit about this, but it might go without saying, actually. When you're talking about playing to not get stunned, the thing that you're talking about is using these defensively, like using them on your opponent's turn, because presumably if it is your turn, you have better things to do or more proactive things to do than just playing to not be stunned.
Correct.
Okay.
In fact, if you have a thing in your hand that is, I'm very confident I won't get stunned, and you only have one thing in your hands, initiating with it is a mistake. Because, great, you won't get stunned. Now it's your opponent's turn, and they can strike, and now you might get stunned.
Right. So
Like you want to have something in your pocket.
you do something else knowing that that thing that you have in your hand that can't get stunned has your back, and you can use it to stay safe on your opponent's turn. So you prep, you change cards, you put a boost down, you do something else.
Mhm.
Makes sense to
Right, right.
me.
All right. Um, so now I already mentioned that these are tech baits, and these are going to get discarded from play. They might even get knocked out of your hand. But you're probably only going to get to play 2 copies, really. I will now explain why I'm a filthy liar, and that's not true at all. Um, please investigate this boost.
Ah. Advance up to 3 if you advance past the opponent. Add a special or ultra boost from your or special or ultra from your discard pile to your hand. Okay, so it's just some recursion for your specials and ultras.
Yes. And in most cases, it's going to bring this back.
Makes sense.
Um, so what will typically happen is that, like, the reason that this is not always happening is in part because there is some value in this attack shape, but also in part just the number of turns where you're going, okay, I need to cross over, pick this up, and then I need to play it again. You already spent a turn playing this earlier. Like, the number of turns it takes you to do things is theoretically a strength of Under Night characters where they can do things relatively quickly, and you're
Right.
starting to lag behind in overall pacing, and that becomes inefficient.
Sure.
So
And
fairly often,
also after you've played it, you are still hoping to get a few more turns worth of value out of it. It isn't something that is so instantly threatening when it hits the board that you will have made up the value that you put into it by playing it.
right, right. I need it to last for more than one strike, or it wasn't really all that great.
So
Um,
getting
so
it
this
back,
is
then playing it, then playing a couple more strikes. We are talking about quite a few turns worth of investment to get something out of this card.
yeah. So like that is the default thing that you will do, but please strongly consider, um, especially this, um, as another thing that you can return to hands, where this is boost this and retreat, boost this and move wherever you want, are both
Right.
great ways to resume command of neutral if you were starting to lose it.
Okay.
Because this is great if you're on top, because you're going, okay, I'm going to keep piling on my pressure, my defensive pressure of just being ahead, even though it's my opponent's turn. But if you need to recover from a bad position, like for example, if you actually got stuns when you didn't mean to, and these hit the trash, okay, you might actually need this more than this, even though you're sad that this is gone.
Sure. Often being stunned when you didn't expect to has implications beyond just losing an important boost. You might conceivably be losing the game at this point, and you need to salvage that situation.
Right. And your best ways to salvage that, generally speaking, are going to be these. Um, and it will make you sad that this is down, but there are 2 copies. There is a reshuffle.
Sure.
Don't I'm getting ahead of myself, but don't hesitate to reshuffle early if all your ultras are down. Like
Sure.
that is a very good reason for you to reshuffle.
And the reshuffle action existing, and also this boosts text, it kind of puts even more pressure to be very careful with using these as attacks because none of those things interact with your sealed area in any way.
Right. If it's sealed, it's gone forever.
Right.
You have no recursion from sealed, only from discard.
Okay. Okay, sure. So I mean, it's not just when they tech it. It's when you get stunned unintentionally, or when you've gotten enough value out of it. Like that. Hey, that was actually a great use of
Right.
Ancile. I'm going to get it again. Why not? Why not
Yeah.
do it more because it worked so well for me before?
Yeah. That's often the case where I pick up the ultras, where I go, okay, I'm doing well. I took a trade that was good enough that I was willing to trade, like Assault into Sweep, where I traded, pretty well considering I have advantage. My ultras hit the discard. That's fine. I'll get them back.
Sure.
I'll get one of them back because I got what I wanted and I'm comfortable with where I'm at. And this also lets me, pick my position to an extent. Uh, Very often, the fact that you need to move over the opponent uh, will just have you sort of. It obviously do the best thing with it that you can. Um, but given how much control or positioning you are likely to have to start with, it's not at all uncommon to go from range 2 to range 2.
Yeah, you're already happy at the range you're at, but you sure would like that boost back in hand, so you just go to the other range too.
Yeah. I will say be cautious of, um, you know, this.
Yeah, watch out
Probably
for
don't.
watch out for cornering yourself.
I am so sorry if you heard that.
I heard a little bit. The noise gate is doing quite a bit of it. That sounds like is that your smoke alarm?
Yeah, it's low on batteries.
All good. I
Sorry,
don't
I
think
didn't.
it's noticeable enough to be a problem for the listener.
Okay. All right. Um, so yeah, be cautious of cornering yourself, but don't feel bad if you just go from range 2 to range 2, especially if it takes you out of the corner. But like even if it doesn't, it's like okay, or from range 1 to range 1, you're like all right, I was actually fine here. Uh, I just really wanted to have something back. That's okay. All right. So first part of playing Wagner, you got stable neutral. Use it. Second part of playing Wagner, you got these. Use them and squeeze as much value out of the boosts as you humanly can. Um, and although we do counterplay at the ends, I will note, in my humble opinion, like uh, you're going to hate playing against Wagner unless you remember these exist because you'll get got. Your opponent has 2 gauge, and you're like, their ultras are in play as boosts. I don't have to worry about them. No, you die.
It's the only time
So
you do have to worry about them.
yes, so playing against Wagner often means like reversing your thinking about how the ultra like when the ultras are threats, because in most characters you just you can shut them out of your mind when they're 2 in discard, 2 in the board. Cool. Not a problem. In fact, that's when they are a problem. You need to be paying attention to her boost board because that is where her ultras come from.
Right.
Just making an aside about that because that's also the thing that, you know, yeah, you will rob games with them if you're learning Wagner and your opponent is learning how to play against Wagner. The Wagner player will probably steal some games because the opponent has forgotten that this is a threat that is on the table. Um, Once that stops happening, good. Now you get to do the more interesting parts of Wagner play. Because it turns out just sort of chunking that somebody with this many stats, a good way to get the game toward an ending. But if they never play against it, it's not all that interesting.
Sure. Yeah, we
Um,
want a game here.
yeah. All right. So um, let's talk about attack shapes and attack shape value, which this might sound a little strange. I think that the way I should actually start is by not burying the lead. How you value these attacks is deceptive because of this. Um, Close retreat 1, play a continuous boost from your gauge, and take another action as long as that didn't cause you to strike. Um, so
Okay.
if you hit with a thing that has a continuous boost, normal, special, or ultra, well, not ultra, sorry, normal or special, ultras don't go to your gauge. That's why you can't
Right.
do that.
Yeah, they can't.
Uh, yes, but yeah, then you can play it again later with movement and possibly get another action out of it. Um, this is, let's see, what do the kids say these days? Low key horrifying.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, that is gonna elevate us with the youth demographic, D.
there we go. Perfect. So there's things I haven't talked about with the attacks and their interactions that I'm really excited to talk about because they're janky and weird and interesting. But please note that the value of hitting with any given thing might be higher if you are going to get enough gauge to flip, which really is just 3 or more.
Okay.
Um, because once you're at uh, being an Under Night character, it means that reverting is not a very high cost, although reverting tends to mean that you wasted time because why did you exceed if you were going to revert? So
Yeah.
generally, this is how you close the game. But notably, you have things that look really, really good at closing the game when they're played from your gauge, especially if they cause you to strike. I'm going to keep coming back to these. But if you actually hit with those attacks, then they can become awesome boosts. And if you play across, then you can then play a superior. Um, Just Defense, kind of underwhelming, except that Just Defense. So this is a kind of a classic paradigm, right? Is that late in the game, you're low on life. You don't really want to play sweep because you could just die. Like you got
Right.
2 lives, sweep's not worth it. So you play light, or in Under Night, you play Just Defense. Well, here you actually can do both. You can say, all right, I'll play sweep early, and then when I'm out of life, I'll play Just Defense. Uh, because you don't get another action, but you can just play it out of your gauge.
Sure.
Uh,
And now you are finding use for a sweep that was otherwise just kind of hanging around.
yep.
Okay. And you mentioned that you were excited to get into some janky interactions, and I'm really excited to learn about those. Just to make sure that I understand this ability as it is written. If you
Yes.
did this and did not, if you did and this did not cause you to strike. So, for example, the use case that we just gave of pulling just defense from my gauge, I cannot take another action after that. But
Right.
I
Striking.
could take um superior, boosting superior from gauge, moving one with my character ability, take another action.
Yes, and in fact, to take that to an extreme, I'm just gonna grab all of them, right? What's like the silliest thing we can do? I don't know. I'm over here. Go, all right, superior and close. Sorry, close one, superior.
Right. I just realized where you
Uh,
were going with this. Yeah, you just
yeah.
scoot across the board.
Close one, this. Close one in respect and advance 3.
Right.
Uh, close one and then advance 1. Not that one. Sorry. Retreat 1 and defends. Retreat 1 and plus power, and then retreat 1 and just defense and strike.
And strike.
Obviously, there's no reason to do this, but like,
Right. Well, I mean,
that,
no, there is. Let's be clear. That was really
okay,
funny.
that was extremely funny. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's not correct to do this if you're trying to win, but it is extremely funny if you actually manage to play. I think in fact you get a Steam pop-up achievement if you play 7 distinct boosts from your gauge in one turn as Wagner.
Hopefully, yeah, even in real life, which is crazy.
Yeah, it just appears on your
UI is
screen.
really doing great things these days. But so I can play a boost that doesn't cost me to strike, and then take the same action again and again and again and again, and just kind of run back and forth for a second and build up all my power, and then strike with something that is probably unbeatable.
Yes. Now, in most
It,
cases, what that actually looks like is boost, boost, strike.
right.
And to be clear, that second thing, when I say strike, is not the strike action. It is just defense, reading, mix up, or tech hit. One of
Sure.
the
One
4
of the
things
many
that
things that
says
you have from
now
gauge
strike.
that, well, I mean, you could
Or
play
from hand.
these. Yeah, these are from hand. These are not
these from
continuous
hand.
boosts.
Yeah, these are from hand. You can't play them
Right.
from your gauge.
Right.
This is the one you can play from your gauge. And it's the one that you want to play from your gauge because it's sweet. Hopefully it's in your gauge. That means you hit
Right.
with it.
Yeah. You got to hit with it.
Mm-hmm. And if you didn't get to hit with sweep, then let me please remind you that this boost exists because this boost is a really, really good way to hit with sweep.
Yeah, and make sweep real scary while you're doing it.
Mm-hmm. But yes,
Okay.
so this is a Wagner that I don't get to play as much as I would like because typically, about a turn or two after I land this thing, my opponent is dead.
Sure.
And if they forgot about this, then they might be dead sooner than that, and then I'm sad because they forgot about that, and that's not how I want to kill people. I want to kill them square in the eye. But the level of good stable neutral that I can play means that I'm not generally like how to put this. I don't struggle for gauge, but I also don't generate it willy nilly.
Right.
I don't have any extra gauge generation. It's just that I only need a little bit. I need 2 for this thing, and then if I get 1 more, it's either forced or it's a reason to exceed, and then start to look at any card that I hit from then on going into my gauge for my ability. It is totally fine,
Okay.
by the way, to have dive and spike or whatever, two instant boosts in your gauge, get a 3rd gauge, exceed, and just say, yeah, from now on, anytime I hit with any of these, it becomes a tool that I can then use the next
Okay.
turn.
This isn't necessarily something that you need to start planning from turn one. You're looking at your deck composition. You're looking at what hands you've been dealt, and if you wind up in a situation where you have an overage of gauge and nothing better to do, you exceed, and then you start planning for the future at that point.
Yeah, or you can even do it in advance of that, just when it's a time that it's okay to do it, where it's like, okay, I'm comfortable defensively here. Either I don't have my Ultra Boost in play, or I have a card in hand that I know won't get stuns. I think that I might be able to get some value out of exceeding, right? I'm looking at this and I'm going, well, I might hit with cross, I might hit with sweep. Like, sure.
Sure.
Go ahead and exceed early, because the other thing is you can in fact revert later. If you get 2 boosts out of this, it was probably worth it, which is not a very large number, but if you get 2 boosts out of this, you probably killed the opponent. Because what you should be doing is you should be playing, one of these mostly. Well, I say mostly, exclusively, but especially that. Then you take another action, and that other action is either, well, sorry, it's not the strike action. It's either you play one of these, or, and I should make this explicit, you take the revert action, and then you strike.
Sure. Yeah. Now you can do that.
Yes. Yeah, sorry, I should make that clear. I don't know if you've had a Hilda lesson, but that this is also a really big deal for her, is that take another action except strike. You can revert, and then, since revert says take another action, strike.
Strike. Sure. Okay. That makes
That is
sense.
legal.
So,
But, at that point, was it worth it to exceed? Well, yes, if it got you the kill.
sure. So the way that you're describing this reminds me a lot of what happens when Guilty Gear characters invest more than one cancel into a single strike, where they're putting it down 2 gauge and 2 boosts to build their own ultra. They probably
Mhm.
just won that strike. And if they didn't win that strike, maybe it was a mistake to do all that canceling in the first place. Like the level of investment that you're putting in means that it's and the things you're getting out of it means that it's going to be very, very hard for your opponent to stop you when you do this.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, and often if you're trying to figure out like, man, that sounds great. How do I actually make that happen? Your main tools for doing that are if you haven't hit with sweep, then hit with sweep. But also you have two cards that say gain advantage on them. And advantage chaining somebody with like I play a boost, I hit you, I get value, I gain advantage. Now it's my turn again. Play another boost, hit you, probably enough to kill them. A lot of people are ready to have one turn go bad, and they're not ready to have multiple consecutive turns go bad.
Sure, that makes
Um,
sense. And so the way that you're describing this also, I mean, we've had lessons in the past. We had a lesson on Emogene, parentheses, the best character in Exceed,
yes,
where you are an Emogene player, not a Hecatoncheir player, not an Exceed mode Emogene player. You are a Remulus player, not a Yellow Death player.
right.
This is not a playstyle evaluation for you as much as it is a game state evaluation. You'll do this when you can, but if you can't, you will stay on front side and you'll just beat the opponent that way.
Yes, and I think
Okay.
that's fine. I don't feel pressured to exceed. I look for, oh, this is a game where my exceed is actually like gonna be great because I have a gauge that actually already looks good for it, or because I'm looking at my hand saying, well, yeah, I'm gonna hit with these three things that I would then like to boost from my gauge. Um, so it is not something that I'm expecting any given game, but I'm happy to do it. Because I'm not really force hungry because I have free movement. I'm not really gauge hungry. I'm a little gauge hungry. I want to have, say, two to start with, and then maybe I'll get away with having another ultra at some point. But still, building 4 gauge is not that hard over the course of the game.
Right.
But like I'll have enough gauge that I can then go, well, what do I spend the rest on? Uh, the answer is either change cards or something a little bit more exciting than that.
Probably not moving because you can move on your own.
Yeah,
Um, Changing cards, certainly not from hand. You could be boosting from hand, but your gauge might be a useful force bank for that. But if you reach the point in the game where you're feeling pretty good and the exceed mode is a way to close the game out before it runs away from you, that's what you'll do.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that is what it's for. It's for closing the game. So
Okay.
you don't need to get many turns out of it. You just need to get the last turns out of it, and for them to be the last turns because of that.
Sure. That makes sense.
Uh, with that, I'll segue into now finally talking about attacks and their kind of goofiness that goes on, leading with your advantage button. Well, okay, I mean, to be fair, there's also assault. Um, range 3, range 1. Uh, at range 1, this attack is really funny because it is a non-reversal reversal. Um, if the opponent initiates, it gets plus speed, which makes it behave like a reversal. What it is it's a jab, right? It's a 1-3-7 if the opponent initiates, which means you can use it to beat mid speeds that have no defensive.
Right. So
Um,
so it would still it's not it's a reversal that doesn't beat grasp, for example. It doesn't beat an on curve button at all.
yeah, like so it's not a reversal in the usual sense, which means like reversal is something that has to be faster than the fastest normal at its maximum effective range. This isn't that, but it's a poke. It's another grasp. It's something that says, hey, grasp had a continuous boost, so I played it earlier. This doesn't, so I'm gonna have this till I need it. And if I didn't need it yet, well, I see your range 1 Fafnir, and I'm going to stun that. Let me not get hit by that. So that would kill me.
Right. Okay, so
Um,
it's a way often mid speeds with no defenses on them are cards that you really don't want to get hit by.
yeah, they tend to be things that deal absurd amount of damage or gain an absurd amount of value.
Right.
So this is a way to keep those in check. It's also a thing that if you initiate, gains advantage, but is under curve, which actually means it is now the mid speed that we just talked about, where it's got some amount of reward, not as amazing as some others, but advantage is a significant reward if advantage means you just played a boost. Now you're going to have another turn where you can play another boost and strike. Or just if you're looking at your opponent's life and you go, well, okay, 2 turns, sure, 3 + 5 = 8, that kills them. Whatever your second attack is. Um, so typically, when I'm ending the game with this, uh, it is EX, one way or another. it is EX. Either via superior or just because I had 2 copies, because I decided that I would rather save this as an EX to end the game instead of recurring something with it.
Right.
Because I was fine with the tools that I had.
Right. Right.
And so, doing something like having a plus power assaults into a range 1 filthy dog into some other thing is a nice way to set up 8+ damage to just kill someone. Um, and a lot of people will have a pocket block or a focus toward the end of the game so they can keep themselves safe against one turn of yours before they
Right.
get to do something,
But
but
not
not 3
the
turns.
not the advantage turn.
Yeah, which you are not really an advantage chaining character, but you should be on the lookout for chances to, you know, gain advantage for just enough time to kill someone.
Right.
Um, because people are expecting you to take a lot of turns. People are expecting you to boost past turn, and then they get to do something. So when the game is toward its ends, and you see a window where you can get through their life in 2 strikes, this is the main way that you'll do that.
Okay. That makes sense because yeah, I mean, passing turn to yourself is something that they are not planning for if they're reading Wagner as a slightly more passive version of an Undernight character.
Mhm.
Makes sense to me.
Yeah, which is normally not an incorrect reading, but
Right.
it is something that you need to subvert in order to make sure that you can kill them before they come back with it on their own time. So that's like the role of Filthy Dog. Numerically, nothing amazing, right? Even EX, it's only 4 power. Even if you had the best of all worlds where you have 4 ultras in play as boosts, doesn't stun sweep, gets reactively stunned. Doesn't stun focus, gets reactively stunned.
Right.
Sorry, doesn't get reactively stunned by focus. Mea culpa. But still, nothing amazing there. Its main role is you gain advantage.
Yeah. You start a
Uh,
combo with it.
yeah. Now, talking about on-curve advantage buttons, or not quite, but maybe on-curve. Uh, Let me also mention, where is that boost? I deliberately overlooked this earlier. Here we are. This boost, deflection, uh,
Whoa.
is really, really strong.
Wow.
Um, yes. So that is typically at least a +1 power, +4 armor boost. I mean, that's kind of the minimum that it is, assuming that you're faster than the opponent.
Yeah.
Um, so that is a great thing to pair with, you know, EX Filthy Dog or on curve assaults or just grasp, for example. Anything on curve where you just say, actually, they're not going to be faster than me, so let me hit them, and then they can play sweep or focus if they want to. I don't care. Um, I'm just going to chunk them for 7, and then I have 7 armor, so whatever. Like
Right.
I don't.
So this is in addition to being a very strong attack that is useful in a lot of sort of just like playing it raw is good. Playing it with a boost on top of it is good. This also doubles up as another way to pretty much guarantee that I'm not going to get stunned
Right.
in a lot of situations.
Yeah, the main issue with this boost is that if you don't have an EX, like you don't have natural reversals. So, things that are above curve normally. You have things that are
Right.
on curve, which means that if you boost this in past turn and your opponent plays on curve, you're going to get outsped. So you
Right.
typically want to already have a speed edge, or you want to play it and take another action because you're in exceed mode, or you just want to have an EX, which is its own speed edge.
Right.
Because you don't want to play this and not be faster than your opponent. Then it's just a +1 power boost and meh.
If you're in exceed mode and have the ability to action compress a bunch of boosts together, there's nothing it sounds like explicitly that would prevent you from doing this, but we haven't really talked about doubling up on your exceed mode and your install boosts. Is that something that you are often doing both at the same time, or is that kind of greedy?
Well, I mean, that does require the revert is the problem, right? You need to close a retreat, play a boost from gauge, revert, play a boost from hands.
Right.
Unless is that what you're asking?
No, I should. That's a really good thought. That was where I was going next. But what I meant was playing in order to not be stunned, in order to
Oh,
maintain the value of these boosts while you're also in exceed mode. Is that something that comes up regularly enough in gameplay that deflection has value as part of that paradigm?
seldom. So
Okay.
the reason it doesn't come out much is because if you spent a turn to exceed, then eh, and you had your ultra boosts already in play, clearly you have something you're confident in playing defensively. You're certain you're not going to get stunned.
Right.
And then probably what will happen is that you then are going to have something that you're going to boost with in order to then strike with, or indirectly strike in order to murder the opponent with a face-up ultra,
Okay.
because that's typically what's going to happen at that point. If you because the turn that you pass by exceeding is a window of opportunity for the opponent to defuse these that you didn't put any stats into play.
Right.
Right? Like any turn that you pass with just these in play, you have to be very confident that like you have a good defensive play because you have both of these in play, you prepare, no stats are on the board except for these. Your opponent now can strike, and they have the half a speed advantage of being the one who initiates, which means that you're at risk of being stunned. So
Right.
you need to be confident you're going to play something that doesn't get stunned. And if you're in that position, chances are it wasn't worth the turn to do that. You would rather pay them out first, and once your ultras have played out, you can look at exceeding. Earlier, when I gave the example of like you get to 3 gauge, now it's okay to spend your 3rd gauge to exceed because you still have 2 for an ultra. Most of the time that I would do that, I'm spending the exceed turn when I don't have those boosts in play already, because that's a turn where it's the least risky to exceed. Right? The
Right.
turns where I'm most willing to do nothing, as it were, which is to say prepare, change cards. The turns where I'm most willing to pass without changing the board state by giving myself stats are the turns where I don't have these in play and therefore don't need to worry about maintaining them.
Interesting, because
And that is the Carmine principle.
I can see an argument there where it would be almost the opposite, where I've put this scary thing down and I say to my opponent, now I'm safe. Now you can't hit me. Next turn I'll exceed. But the value that I would be losing if my opponent did stun me when I did that is enough that I actually am I'm committing too much to the board to make that be worthwhile. It sounds like.
Yeah, it's the Carmine principle of once your setup's in play, like then you want to make sure that you're not getting it's not being wasted.
Sure.
Right. So like once these are in play, exceeding is far too often for me like too great a risk, where instead I should be looking to capitalize or to secure my position. I will totally change cards at that point because I need to dig for something good. I need to dig for an EX. I need to make sure that I have the right tools in hand, throw away whatever the least useful stuff I have is, dig aggressively. That's fine. But just exceeding, where I draw a total of 1 card, now it's my opponent's turn. I have done nothing else to change the board state. In most cases, I'm at risk of them doing something, and this value is going to be wasted. Or if not exactly wasted, it's going to be something that's harder for me to make. It's a chance for them to do something to disrupt this that I would sooner not give them. Um,
At a time when you specifically don't want to be disrupted.
yeah,
Makes
because it's
sense.
also you're also. I mean, if I have 5 or 6 gauge, maybe then it's fine. Because if I have 5 or 6 gauge and something good defensive that I know one could stuns, then I flip, I pass turn. They're not likely to stun me on the first strike. If they gain advantage, then I might have a problem. But with that much gauge, I'm likely to be able to pull things out of my gauge as boosts that will be formative enough that I can get an insane amount of value off of actually using these attacks. Um, let's see. The issue with doing it with less essentially is you will quickly become strapped for options, right? So your exceed ability is strong, except that the list of things you can do with it is relatively short. You have to first land with these attacks, which in many cases are kind of janky or kind of medium value or a little
Right.
unreliable. And those are the only things you can pull out of your gauge. And you need to use that, like you need to need that thing for it to be good. So if I'm looking at this and I'm looking at my gauge, chances are I'm not going to be in a position to say, okay, I flip, I have a stable defensive play, and my gauge contains exactly, you know, superior, and I have reading in hand, right? Or
All
things
of
up
the
in hand.
continuous boost and now strike and now
In
boost that
hand.
allow me to strike that I need to get this perfect setup.
Yeah. Where I go, I have this thing where I'm going to hit with this and not get reactively stunned so I don't waste anything.
Right.
And also I have this thing that will let me strike, while staying
Right.
in exceed mode. And
At
even
that point
then,
you're spinning too
yeah,
many plates. You're trying to juggle too many things at once and something's probably going to have to give.
yeah, like if all those things line up, if all those things are true, then I would be happy to do that. I routinely do not find that to be the case.
Yeah.
Typically, if I get to 5 gauge, it's because I have 3 instant boosts, 3 or 4 instant boosts, 1 or 2 continuous boosts. And at that point, I'm looking at those boosts going, well, when is the right time to use exactly this? And at 3 gauge, as you might guess, that proportion is maintained. I have maybe 1 continuous boost. I have 2 instant boosts. And I go, well, if I exceed now, then like then you playing one of these as an attack removes my gauge. I have no gauge left whatsoever. I have to land something.
Why did I
Um,
exceed at that point?
yeah, I want to
Right.
have something that I can use. But yeah, it's possible for things to line up that way. I find they normally do not. Like I'm willing to exceed um, prospectively. What's the word I want?
Proactively?
Uh, I think so. In anticipation that I will get something engaged that will be useful. Uh, given that I have something like that in hands,
Sure,
if I
sure.
have a
You're not
grasp
hoping that
across
you
or
draw
something.
into a great continuous boost to put into your gauge, but
Yes.
after you've already exceeded.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be in my gauge. It needs to be in my gauge or my hands.
Right.
Um, I'm not so willing to do that and say, and also I need to make sure that I'm getting value out of this without losing access to the things that I need for my exceedability to have been worth it. Yeah, it's usually not, in my experience, it's usually not worth the turn to do that unless everything is lined up perfectly, and it just won't be.
Nope, that makes
Um,
perfect sense.
all right. So deflection is nuts. As noted, pairs well with EX Flip Dog, EX Grasp, anything on curve on your turn. Anything EX, well, not anything EX, but especially things that become reversals. So EX Assault, EX Grasp, EX Cross, EX Dive on the opponent's turn. You also have a Assault like in terms of its range 1 to 3, speed 5. So, another thing that can become above curve if you EX it. Um, that usually won't happen because why did you have both these in your hand? You should have boosted it, but it could happen. It could happen.
Right.
It's allowed. Um, and deflection is often great for maintaining not getting stunned. Almost always great for just making sure that you don't trade badly because yeah, your grasp hits a focus and takes 0, and that's pretty silly.
That feels pretty
It's
good.
a privilege not a lot of people get.
Oh, and this
Um,
I've seen a similar effect on a couple other characters, maybe one other character that is gain armor equal to the damage dealt. But this is
yeah,
equal to power. This is like
yeah,
if they play the focus, you're still getting 4 armor out of it.
correct. Armor equal
Interesting.
to your power. Yep, not equal to the damage dealt. Which the most people aren't going to have so much armor that it matters. But hey, maybe you're playing against Potemkin or somebody who
Right.
has an unreasonable amount of armor, and you go, well, okay, the amount of damage I deal might not be very high, but you're not going to deal that much damage back to me, so it's okay.
Right, right, right. That makes sense. Okay.
All right. Okay. Deflection is great. I think I was going into attack shapes. I was just mentioning that because it's part of the Filthy Dog line is that you will be playing this boost with this attack moderately often. At least that's the boost that I usually play with this attack.
Right.
Or sorry, that's the attack I usually play with that boost. This or Grasp or Assault, like your advantage buttons. Attack jank now. All right. Why do I keep saying these are janky? Well, we've already seen one bit of jank, which is that Shieldzok, if you did not hit, turns into defend, so you gain armor and guard in the middle of a strike at speed 6. Excuse me. That's a little weird. Most people don't have their attack lead play in the middle of a strike.
Right.
Anyway, you have 2 others that do that, so let's go through them.
Sure.
Um,
The
here,
reason that
here's
nobody else has that is because Wagner took all of them.
Wagner took all of it. Yep. Here's a speed 4. Now let's start by actually looking at this attack shape because this is a good attack shape. This is your other donkey kick, in case you didn't like the first one.
Right.
It doesn't have guard, but it beats sweep at ranges 1 and 2. It just pushes 3. It says, off you go, away with you. I don't need you here. At range 3, it has the curious property of also beating sweep and spike. At range 3, where it doesn't hit.
Oh yeah, you just
Uh,
back up.
there you go. So to solve the puzzle for the viewers who haven't caught on, after if this didn't hit, you may add it to your boost area as a continuous boost, which has a now effect. So, as during this after timing, you will then advance or retreat 1, which means that this can be a useful way to dodge anything that's slower than speed 4, depending on the positioning you're at. Usually, this will be something that you can play at range 3 or 4 to evade something like a spike or certain projectiles or a sweep.
Okay.
Um, so this is a property that I've used more often than I would expect, considering the number of things that it can still lose to under those circumstances, and also because I like playing this boost just by default. But notably, if you have, for example, defend in play, um, throwing this out there and saying, well, if they play a sweep or a focus, then I trade and it's fine. Or sorry, I trade with focus, I beat sweep. If they play something else and they escape, for example, cross or grasp, and they push me back or they retreat, well, they initiated. Now, even though you don't hit them, you get to move into a better range for you, and you have plus 1 speed, and it's your turn.
Yeah, that's a
That's nice.
surprisingly good loss case for a boost like that, and it has a similar kind of what I said about Filthy Dog, where the thing that you are really trying to not lose to is that unguarded command grab mid speed that's really scary. If you're dodging sweep with it and you're able to um, catch up to your opponent's grasps or crosses with it, for example, uh, when they escape you, the loss case that the things that this loses to often aren't that scary. It doesn't seem like. I guess other than maybe that assault at range 3 would be pretty bad for you.
Yeah, assault's really the thing that's terrible, which is actually why it's notable that a defend
Right.
covers assault.
Right. Specifically to allow you to deal with that common on curve, sort of the stat profile of an on curve range 3 button is around 4 power.
Yep. I will note that in closer ranges, this boost, 1 copy, plus making this EX one way or the other, either with 2 copies or with superior, is 3 defense. And we now have that same situation of, well, anything other than assault, it's fast, it hits me for next to nothing, and I move and I get this. Or it's slow, I hit them for a bunch, and they might hit me for next to nothing.
Right.
So you run into the very amusing case of that combination, this or just 2 copies of this, being something that kind of only loses to range 1 assault, which is a very
And
rare play.
that's a pretty gutsy play in its own right. Range 1 assault is something that people do not love doing sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, no, and that
Yeah.
there's a surprising. I mean, the term you used was jank. We can be maybe more charitable and say like surprising utility, but
Yeah.
playing this
Yeah.
in places that you don't really expect to find value out of it. Oh, look, there's value here, and quite a bit of it. It sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah, I should be clear because I don't know how terminology or vernacular changes, but like I don't mean jank as anything derogatory. I think it's great.
Oh,
I
definitely,
just
yeah,
mean that, yeah. I'm just making that explicit for listeners, right? It's like, hey, when I say that, I don't mean anything bad by it. I mean unexpected things,
yep,
things that you go, oh, that's interesting. Yeah, surprising utility is a nice way to say this the exact same thing. Is like things that I go, hey, look, you do this, and then your face looks across the table and goes, oh yeah, you do.
yeah.
Um,
That was really cool. Let me note that for later, so you don't do it to me again.
just so. Uh, all right, and here's our third one, which is actually, in my opinion, significantly the worst of them.
Okay.
So before close 2, speed 5. So again, kind of as I mentioned, right? This is your assault shape. It's on curve at range 3.
Right.
Doesn't gain advantage. After advance 2, and then it has the effect: if it did not hit, you may add 2 booster as you continue to stand. So
Mm.
um, the main use of this is either, well, okay, the main use of this is the boost. But when you play this as an attack, you're playing it because you desperately needed something that was a lot like assault and you didn't have it, or you're at a range greater than 3 and you really, really need to duck under your opponent's projectile that is slower than speed 5, where you go, oh, I don't want to lose the game to Tiger Shot, or to low Tiger Shot, excuse me. Um, and this is 4 spaces of movement at speed 5. Okay, cool. That's pretty good. If that happens, awesome. That is the best case for this card, in my opinion, is that you dodged your projectile and you got this boost into play. And now you're probably at range 2, and that's an awesome setup.
Yeah, probably
Um,
you did all that on your opponent's turn. Again, that is a hefty. If we're thinking about not hitting with this as a loss case, that is a hefty loss case. That feels pretty good to get.
yeah, that's fantastic. The problem with this is, well, it it will walk into a lot of things that you will not be happy that it walks into. If the opponent knows about that as an option and they're holding, low Tiger Shot or some other projectile, they can play a sweep, and then you walk in and you do get this boost, but you also take 6 damage in a card, and it really wasn't worth it at that
Yeah,
point.
that does not feel good at all.
Yeah. It can also have some. It often will make your position worse, which is to say, because you're so good at maintaining good positions normally, the fact that this causes you to advance 2 as an after effect will often put you in the corner,
Oh,
because you just
sure.
normally aren't there to begin with.
Right, yeah, because you have good enough neutral that you could normally avoid it.
Yeah, so it's like normally you have command at the center of the board. which means that this isn't really an uncornering tool so much as it is a cornering tool by accident, in my
Right.
experience.
Okay.
Um, so this is the one of these that I'm like the most reluctant to use, even though it installs the boost, which of these I definitely think is the strongest. Like this is
Right.
a very, very good boost.
Right. Right.
Um, but I would rather just play the boost and say, okay, well, here we are at range 4. I could have played this attack, or I could play this boost, and now I just hit with assault instead of playing a weird assault to kind of dodge. Um, or I could play a spike or a sweep or whatever. The fact that I can hit with my range 3 mix up at range 4 is awesome. So I'd rather
Yeah.
just play the boost from hand instead of try to sneak it into play. Um, like the drawback is you pass turn, but this is a boost that's relatively safe to pass turn on because it's very, very good.
It's really, really scary, sure. And I mean, the example that you gave of a time when you are happy to use this attack as a specifically a projectile dodge that installs a great boost was low tiger shot, which is like one of the scariest. That's like one of the scariest cards to get hit by in all of Exceed.
Yeah,
Yeah, if
that's
I can
probably the
dodge that,
most
I'm going to
punishing.
dodge that. But
It's yeah.
many characters don't have something at range that is that oppressive and that terrifying.
Mhm.
Sagat also has a boost called Terrifying, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, true. Yes.
But in regular play against a character who doesn't have something that threatening, I can probably just make use of the boost in my very good neutral to maintain ranges where I don't have to deal with those scary projectiles super often. It sounds like.
Right. Yeah. The time that this plays that when this comes out as an attack, uh, in my experience, it's usually because I wild summon it.
Sure.
It is. I might EX it sometimes if I really, really needed to and I didn't have assault on hand or if I'd already used assault or something. But this boost is really valuable. I can do a lot of things with it. At any given range, I can make a reversal, well, except for one. But at one, I can just play sweep, and it's pretty good.
Right.
Yeah, I love this boost. I think it's fantastic. Um, actually, taken by itself for what it does to your neutral, that's the strongest boost in the kit. It's
Yeah.
not going to provide the same amount of value as these, but when you play it, it has a bigger impact than any other boost that you could play on that turn. In all
When you're
likelihood.
putting a threat on the board or safety on the board, and that's all you care about. I mean, when we talked about recover, the only boost that we talked about tactical a little bit as well, but
Yeah,
the
you,
only
you
boost
might.
that really competed with your ultras as targets for recursion was overpower.
Yep, and that's exactly right.
Makes sense.
Um, real good. Okay, so yeah, as we can see, we have three specials which have conditions that allow them to install themselves as lost cases. Which I've described how this can be great in various ways. Still don't expect that to be the usual way you play the card.
Right.
Look, like that's the way that you can use this as a unique tool. But for the most part, you're boosting that. You're boosting that. You can go either way on this one, but you're probably boosting it.
Yeah.
Like this one is a decent enough attack when I'm boosting cross, and therefore I need to make sure I still represent range 2 speed 6 sometimes. But also if I'm trying not to knock it stuns, man, that sure looks good.
Yeah.
So like expect these to be boosted by default, and then realize, oh, I need something that does this. Oh, I actually do have a thing that beats sweep at range 1. I actually do have an anti-projectile. I actually do have a thing that at range 3 it counters assaults in the strangest possible way just by not getting
Right.
me stuns and putting defend into play. Gives me a much better lost case. Doesn't really counter it, but yeah. So like, be aware that that's how you can use these. Don't expect it to be the default state. And that's essentially your specials kit. I already covered Wagner, which is just an insane attack already. Like play this whenever you want to. How could it ever be wrong? The stats on this are nuts. I will reserve it if I need to reserve it to have something that won't get stunned by anything if that's what I'm trying to do. But man, I would really prefer to just play this as an attack, especially on curve.
Right. Yeah. EX or tactical whack and rotor sounds pretty great. And honestly, like the time that you don't want to use this as an attack is when you really need deflection, it seems like.
Yeah, yeah. If I'm up close in my opponent's face and I'm like, oh man, I really need to not get stunned by something. The only reason not to throw deflection there is if I have nothing fast left. I would still
Right.
tend to prefer to say, okay, well then I'll play deflection, go for a grasp. And if they have a grasp, I probably have a slow left. Otherwise, I've done something wrong earlier in the game.
Right. Right. Okay. So specials, ultras. we've covered all of her unique her unique cards at this point. We've covered quite a few of the normals, at least as what they do for continuous boosts for her neutral or for her accelerated neutral, I guess, or aggressive neutral when she's in exceed mode.
Mhm.
Um, Also, her ability to tee off strikes from hand in her exceed mode as these boosts. Any other important neutral interactions? I'm sorry, normals interactions that we should be on the lookout for Wagner.
Well, I'll make a couple notes. Just to be explicit, it is fine to play, these as attacks just because they have great boosts that I like to play all the time. Don't think you shouldn't ever play them. Sometimes you have to.
Right.
And relatedly, like represent your core mix-up. You are somebody who has stable neutral, decent tools to be where you want to be, and then can just kind of play good exceed. So like focus on doing that a lot, which means don't forsake your mid speeds. A problem I've run into a bunch is that I go, oh, I find these cool ways to use these tools, and then eventually somebody looks at my entire kit and says, wait, I can just play focus. And I go, yeah, you're right, you can just play focus. Turns out, with the single exception of Fucking Rotor, um, yeah, they can just play focus.
Okay.
You're not going to do anything about that. I'm like, yeah, you're right. So, but yeah, you like range 2 to 3. That works out well for you, too, especially because that's already a good range to threaten Spike. And you need to play that sometimes just to make sure that people die to Spike sometimes.
Sure.
Uh,
Oh, and I mean that's another reason that if you're hanging out at range 2 a lot, that's another reason that overpower is so useful because it does give you that range 2 dive that lets you have a little
mhm.
bit more of a mid speed threat to deal with things that your opponent
Yeah,
or deal with things like focus.
yeah. The overpower says, hey, look, I can play a grasp, and therefore dive is your mix-up.
Right.
Dive is also a notable range 4 threat where like dive is already good at range 4, but overpower dive at range 4 doesn't even lose to sweep or focus because
Sure.
it becomes range 3 dive. This is an attack. You should not even consider bailing off. The reason I say that is not because your exceed mode's not good. I've already established that it is. But of all things you want in your gauge, you want to hit with this one. The numbers are too good. You need the value. Like you don't. By the same token that you have nothing that beats a focus, unless you stack a lot of stuff onto things. Uh, Neither do most people.
Right. Right. Focus is
Range one
is
focus
is the gold
is good.
standard of defense in exceed.
Yes, and you need that because your tools. I said you can kind of make anything a reversal thanks to overpower and thanks to tactical and thanks to movement and your ability all that, but you don't start with any. So you need to have something that is stable and defensive, and focus does that job.
Sure.
Uh, uh, this is whatever. This is matchup tool. Like you can play block if you need it, use tech it if you need it. I leave that to you. That's
Makes
not very
sense.
helpful advice, but that's because I don't actually think either of these is specifically important for Wagner. That's just kind of normal exceed stuff.
Sure. And Wagner
Uh,
is going to be playing a lot of normal exceed stuff. One of the things that you're doing in normal exceed stuff is evaluating how you're going to deal with your opponent's boosts or their big scary attacks.
yep, just so. Yeah, one. This is another like normal exceed thing, but let's make it explicit, which is in season 6 in particular, characters get to play more EXs than general as long as they're willing to give it their crosses. You should be very willing to do that because you have another speed 6 range 2 option, as we covered, not
Right.
counting the ultra. You have 2 arguably, but that one's kind of face up.
Right.
So yeah, be willing to play superior. It's great. Your ability is good at making it work. Cross is not very important to you because you're not great at long range. You don't really have anything going on beyond range 4. Even overpower doesn't really make you all that impressive at that point. So play that and play sweep. And, you know, who knows? Maybe you'll see them again sometime. Um, yeah. Keep 2 gauge to threaten your ultras, but, you know, beyond 2 gauge, do whatever it seems right. You can use it as force. You can, I guess, take the move action sometimes. I don't know why you need to, but okay, whatever. That's up to you. Um, you have permission to take the move action. It's just very, very rare that you'll need to because you should be in control of your positioning.
And you definitely have
Uh,
permission to take the change cards action. That is
and
part
yeah,
of neutral as well.
absolutely.
Yeah.
That is part of neutral. You should be expecting to change cards, not as often as, once again referencing Byakuya, but yeah, you should expect to do that because every turn matters, and your opponent, knows that you take turns to do things. You also know this. So when you have a turn that you can safely draw cards, you probably want to change cards instead of preparing because that gets you more new cards. Um, you give up some old cards, so give up the old cards you need the least, draw the new cards you need the most.
So some of that old card is probably going to come from gauge. Some of it's probably going to come from hand. You're going to have to find that in the moment.
Yeah,
Don't dip below 2 gauge if you can possibly afford to.
right, because your ultra threat is too important.
That makes sense.
Okay.
All
Any
right.
other normal interaction? Not that I can think of.
All right. Any other strategic notes, or can I send this back in time to young Gearface to get marginally less beaten up by your Carmine in 2022?
I think that covers it for Wagner play.
All right.
I already like reference counterplay.
Yeah, let's talk about it though.
Yeah, which is essentially like step zero. Remember these ultras exist when they're in play as boost. Remember that they don't exist when they're not in play as boost. Do not psych yourself out thinking you need to play against this because if it's not on the board, you actually don't. Um, do in fact think about the fact that if you're really afraid of a range 2 speed 6 thing, well, she still has one. It's just not that. Um, so like, you know, if you think that she doesn't have a range 2 speed 6 because you're only thinking of her specials as boosts, no. There are attacks, and this is actually one of the more important ones because range 2 speed 6 is an important number. But yeah, broadly speaking, like try to bully her, right? She needs turns to do things, and what she wants to do is gradually accumulate these ultra boosts for value that lasts for the entire game. And what she needs to do is try to be careful as she gets them into play to consistently have things that will let her play without getting stuns. The more you can rush her down, the better. It's just true of basically everybody, but in particular, any window where you see a chance to surprise her with an EX or pull your own advantage chain where she doesn't have time to recover and redraw more cards to get these out of play without having to spend your own tech or tech hit or your chemi, that's fantastic, right? That's denying her value that would have been free if you get a stun off and knock these off the board.
Right.
Because getting them back is a huge pain for her.
Right. The math we've been
You
talking about this whole time has been you're probably going to have two of these because there's going to be two techs in play. Well, now we're talking about Wagner with less than two, and now all of this math changes. Now all of the value math we're talking about is way less favorable for her.
Yes, and at
Makes
that point
sense.
she has to play pretty craftily because her numbers are not amazing. I mean, she has decent like power values, but as I mentioned, nothing above curve by default. Um, she has to use boost to make that happen, and nothing that hits any really important power breakpoints by default. She has to use boost to make that happen. She is
Right.
good at using boost to make that happen, but this makes her highly susceptible to things like advantage chains. Also, if you are a character who has your own big stat boost, you know, not like some people, um, then feel free to overwhelm her when she says, "I have +2 armor and +2 power," and you say, "Okay, I have +4 speed," and you go, "Oh,
Oh, I see now.
I see."
I didn't know
Even
that
if you don't
numbers
have
got
that,
that high.
yeah, even if you don't have that level of stat boost, be aware, like be cognizant of asymmetric boost wars and how they interact. Which is to say, if she has no speed and you have something that can stun anything at the range you're at, mostly this means you have spike at range 2 or 3, then you can bring out your speed and say, okay, I have plus speed and you don't. My spike is very threatening. This turns into the mix-up of does she play against the spike by playing something on curve, or does she lose to your on curve button by playing her own on
Something on
curve in a
curve.
near faster? Yeah. It's like, so does she cover or does she lose? And then if she plays the thing that covers your on curve, then she loses spike.
Sure.
Like you want to command that mix-up, in particular because any turn that you pressure her into initiating is actually uncomfortable for Wagner. Like Wagner wants to play her ultra as a pop-up surprise on defense where you get gots. She doesn't expect that to happen, but it can happen. She wants to throw it when it's completely unbeatable, and therefore you just kind of stare at it and you go, "Oh, I guess I play a focus or a block." Um, and she generally wants to be playing her attacks and saying, "Okay, I'm going to do this peculiar thing over here because it's my turn next, and I'll play a boost, and I know what I'm doing." Uh, if it's your turn next and she has to strike, like the only particularly bad thing that's going to happen to you, barring the results of the strike itself, is if she gets advantage. Because if it's your turn and she has no boost in play, you can probably beat her. Like card to card, most characters have better card quality than Wagner, in my opinion. Uh, she's really good at getting the boost that she wants to play at the ranges that she wants to play them, because that's what she does.
Right.
Uh,
So anything that her opponent can do to either make those advantages less relevant by outstatting her, or just pressuring her so hard that she doesn't have time to get her setup down is going to make her rely on her decent but not incredible attacks.
Yep. And if you struggle to make these things happen, because this is tough stuff, right? Like if your opponent knows how to not get stunned by anything, then you're going to sit there all game going, how do I stun them? They never got stunned. What's
Right.
going on?
Right.
That is in fact why you have Ukemi or Tech Hit or Tech to say, well, the first couple of these, especially this one, I don't have to worry about. If you have a parry, which season 6 actually doesn't, but seasons 1 through 5 and 7 do, then after she recurs one, you can get it out of her hand. That's fine. And even after she has these in play, if she only has one of any given stats, you can still play Focus. You can still play, EX Sweep or EX most anything actually, and like the EX stats alone are a big deal. Like play your strong tools and don't be too hesitant about it, because plus one of anything is kind of what she does. So if you can surprise her with an EX, you may not get a surprise stun on her, but you're likely to make up more ground than it might feel like you can make up. Because if you're trading consistently, like basically if you compress all the power of your cards into the same number of strikes that she does, instead of spreading them around and doing things less efficiently, then okay, you'll probably still come out fine, right? You can if you say, all right, I don't play sweep twice and trade down twice. I play EX sweep once and trade even, and then I play EX grasp once and trade even, right? That's okay. Just means you need to draw more cards more aggressively. You need to change cards. You may need to even reshuffle action if you run out of the tools that you need.
Right. Now it's on Wagner to make up that value rather than get that little incremental advantage that she's able to snowball with. Maybe now she has to exceed desperately in trying to get a whole lot of value all at once. You're making her use her resources less efficiently than she'd like. Things will, if you can keep parity with her, it sounds like things will start going badly for her in the other direction if she's not careful.
Yeah, she doesn't do anything particularly special with regard to her in game without using her exceed and some pretty specific resource setups to make it happen.
Right.
Her main in game is like clobbered you for 6 or 7 with my ultra. Now I'm going to try to find a place to get a little 8 damage advantage chain to drop you to 0. And you will very often have counterplay against that. Like most characters do. At minimum, again, EX sweep, focus, block. She does not have any ignore armor options. So you can just sort of sit there.
Right.
Like it doesn't help against her ultras because blocking doesn't stun her. Like, she will not get stunned.
Right.
But it can make an advantage chain that would have been lethal non-lethal, and then you'll get a turn back.
And she might be spent at that point. You have a chance to claw some advantage back.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
No, that's mainly it. Obviously, if you have above curve pokes, yeah, bully her. Like she really hates dealing with those. She is on curve unless she has boost.
Makes sense. And it sounds like really all she's doing is playing a slightly, as again, janky version of Good Exceed. You're
Yeah.
probably going to have to do some of that yourself. You're probably going to have a fundamentals contest with her, and she's a character who has good fundamentals, but not a ton else other than some surprise ultras and some good boosts.
Yeah. What she rides on is good fundamentals and also what I call delta, right? Is just getting so much value out of these that you can't overcome it because her fundamentals are good enough to keep her from losing ground.
Okay.
These are really hard to deny, but you can compete with her at fundamentals. And then with her relying on that, things get a lot dicier for her.
Makes sense. All right. I feel like I now definitely for sure, and clearly you were using all of this counterplay yourself when you kicked my teeth in 2 years ago when I was playing Wagner.
Yeah, I totally
And
knew. Yeah.
and I'm here to tell you that this counterplay works extremely well against her. I have the experience in that matter at least. Finally, the last thing we like to ask on these lessons is uh, if our viewers are a Wagner fan and really like how she plays and are looking to branch out into other characters, any recommendations about who they should check out?
All right. So, it definitely depends on what you like about Wagner. I actually think I'm probably unusual as a Wagner player in that this doesn't feel like the kind of character that I would normally like. Um, and to be perfectly blunt, she's not like my favorite. She's not my top one in season 6. Um, but I like Exceed. I like neutral. I like just playing normals, and it turns out a character that's good at that is a character that I'm pretty fine with. Um, and that is in my opinion like most of her identity. The ultras are the other half of it, but that's just that's the Wagner spice that everybody needs to learn. And once you stop losing to it, then you get to play the rest of the game. Um, so the caveat here is that I'm actually not a Chun-Li player, but Chun-Li sure does boost and move. That is in fact like her ability is any given boost also has retreat 1 on it.
Right.
And she has a lot of little stat boosts. She has a +1 power. She has a +1 speed. She has a plus. The heck is that? Sorry, there's another stat boost.
She's got the one on head
Stun
stomp.
immunity.
Yep, she's got stun immunity. She's got an ignore guard, ignore armor,
and ignore armor. Yeah,
and that
then
weird
and then
repeating
repression.
one.
Yes, that's it. Okay, there actually wasn't another +1. So +1 power, +1 speed, and then various other things. But yeah, and a lot of Now Strike, which, hey, if you like season 6, you probably like Now Strike.
Sure.
So Chun-Li, relatively defensive, relatively setup oriented. Probably definitely more of a zoner than Wagner. Plays more at range than Wagner does. But does a lot of boosting and moving. That is for sure a thing.
It has a very non-optional Exceed mode compared to
that is true.
Wagner.
Yes. Very much so. My next thought is Propeller Knight. This is harder for me to put on why I feel like these are similar. If anything, it's probably just that I also think Propeller Knight is kind of a fundamentals oriented, play some Exceed. You don't have a lot of really amazing special things that are like overwhelming. You have some dumb ultras and you have some +1 boosts and you play good Exceed.
Right.
Like he's got a +1 power. He's got a +1 power and speed. He's got a +1 speed, another +1 power. And another way to recur a boost, which she also has seen. And also does a lot of micro dashing, I guess. A lot of little positioning throughout the game. Like move 1 and strike is kind of Propeller Knight's identity, which is odd because it's not in his character card, but it is. Let's see. Those felt like the obvious ones. Yeah. I mean, also, I guess, obligatory, any Shoto, which, if you're not familiar with the term, this basically refers to this archetype of Rio, a character that has a reversal, which immediately she doesn't, a fireball or a projectile, some sort of closing movements, like a dive-like or an assault-like, especially from range, and often some sort of overhead mix-up where they can clobber you if you try to play a block or a focus, something like that. That at least is how it usually plays out in Exceed.
Right.
Shotos are fundamental oriented, puts these characters, also movements. Well, excuse me, forgot movements. It's kind of important here. So there's a lot of characters in the game who are like that.
Yeah, you look at Kai, Ryu. It's interesting because of the sort of hallmarks of Shotos and Exceed, she's actually missing quite a few of the traits, but she hits the vibe. She gets the vibe check perfect.
Yeah, she's very much. I'm here to play good old fashioned Exceed. She, like I said, she has a knowledge check. She has a gate where you must be this tall to enter, and once you have experience with it, then you get to play the rest of the game, and that's the fun part. Is going,
right.
Oh, you're just doing this thing that's giving you a slightly broader range of mix up. She doesn't do anything particularly unbeatable, but call her wrong enough times or let her get her deltas consistently enough, and you can't beat her anymore because you can't claw your way back up.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, Kai is a good example. Kai has +1s. He is movement, and he is just kind of he's honest. Right. That's another thing that's kind of in common among these is like just look at their attack shapes and you're like, man, where's the really unfair thing that my opponent will hate that they can't do anything about?
Maybe I don't have one.
Yeah, none of these characters have that baseline.
Yeah.
Your mileage may vary. You might look at Vapor Thrust and go, wait, no, that's not okay. You might look at Wagner Rotor and be like, hold on, are you saying that's like okay? Like, well, in the normals paradigm, yeah, it loses to assault, it loses to when defending, it loses to dive. loses to Cross, it loses to Grasp. I'm like, yeah, it's not overwhelming.
Right.
It's not the kind of card where your opponent plays an EX and it's absolutely 100% unstoppable,
And wins them
um,
the game on their own.
and wins the game.
Right.
Although it's pretty close to that. Um,
The commonality also that we're discovering here is that these are all characters that I like.
oh, excellent.
Like good, honest, slightly maybe kind of boring Exceed is at least prior to having all these lessons and learning about all the cool characters in the game. That was my wheelhouse, so I can see why I picked up Wagner early on.
Excellent.
So it's all characters
Yeah, that tracks.
that are here to play Exceed. I have one addition to our list here for the Undernight
Please
fans in
do.
the audience. If you read Wagner's character card and saw action, close, or retreat, wait a minute, and then didn't read it and then didn't listen any more of the lesson, realized that this was a character who was going to be passing turn without striking, and realizing that that is not exactly what you wanted out of your source material Wagner, who is a gorilla of a character in Undernight. Um, if that's what you're looking for, I thought of this during the lesson, D, and I'm very proud of it. Not that.
Okay.
This is Wagner.
Oh. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. That was
Um,
bad, even by our standards, and I will not apologize for it. But if what you're looking for is a character who plays like Undernight Wagner, who is a bully, who is going to hold forward and beat you to death, there's a lot of very aggressive characters in Exceed. Probably the one that is the most that resembles her play patterns the most is Ragna. So it's not just for the pun that I did that, but it was kind of just for the pun.
okay, that's pretty good. I will say the one of the other classic gorillas, just
Oh
to,
yeah,
to throw
May
it
is
out, is
is a
May.
great call out.
But yeah, Ragna I would assess is more fundamentals, and May is more rush down
Right.
between the two.
Is
But
more
Ragna's
hold forward
also,
and beat you up.
yeah, May kind of is holding forward by default, and her stick is stuck, like her controller's broken.
Right. Yeah,
Ragnar can
and
make
she's
some
fine with
choices.
that.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Like she never noticed her controller was broken. To be
Right.
clear,
Yeah, she still beat you just fine with it. Okay.
she
Yeah.
was
No,
she would be doing the same thing anyway.
yeah, I think that tracks. But yeah, so I mean, you have your if you are a Wagner fan and you are really disappointed by her Exceed interpretation not hitting quite those playstyle notes, you definitely have options. Um, honestly, a lot of other Undernight characters don't pass turn nearly as much as she does. Look at Linne, look at Unkadu. You do have some people who can scratch that itch and still give you the Undernight uh, play experience. But definitely in all of Exceed, you will find some characters who can play like her. And then if you like this Wagner, we've got Wagner as she's played. We've got some slightly more neutral oriented options for you.
Yeah, I also want to add, just so I'm not, I I don't want folks to overlook older seasons if you play digitally in particular. So let me go back a bit and say that our original Propeller Knight, um, if you want to move and strike, uh, Ulrich's main issue here is that he doesn't really uh, his neutral is shaped very differently. He is not a neutral monster. He is good at striking on the turns that he sets, and he has an immense amount of power. And his mix-ups are good as printed. He doesn't actually have to set things up much.
Right.
But uh, he was in some ways the template for Propeller Knight, where Propeller Knight rounded things out a lot more and became a lot less power oriented and more journalistic.
Right.
Good old fashioned Exceed. Equus actually is Mr. Exceed. I think after a lengthy discussion at one point, there was a community consensus that of all the characters in season 2, Equus plays the most Exceed. We had to exclude the promos because I think Carl actually
Yeah,
thinks that.
Carl is very much an Exceed player. Carl loves Exceed.
Yep. But of the 7 crosscast, Equus might play the most Exceed. He looks at you and says, "I'm going to play this really honestly, and you're going to die."
Right.
And very likely you do. And lastly, if you absolutely love passing turn, and that's all you want to do, and you never want to initiate a strike, um,
Oh
there,
yeah.
there is there is a Shovel Knight from before the Shovel Knight season existed. This
Yeah,
is so-called Promo Knight or Solo Knight.
we do have the dark arts for you here.
Yes, the character who infamously, I think infamously, I'm not sure if that's still true, but at one point at least infamously was revolutionized by people being willing to just sit there and boost and never do anything else.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's Promo Knight or Solo Knight or whatever you want to call him.
Yeah, it's a dangerous forbidden technique of inaction that paid off.
Yep. But
Um,
yeah, if you go, man, I love having stats. I wish I had more stats and less action.
yeah.
That's your Shovel Knight.
Seconding Dee's recommendation to look at older seasons, especially if you play digitally, one of the privileges of doing these guides is being exposed to characters that I would never have looked twice at. And there's a huge concentration of those characters in these first two seasons of Exceed. Where when I started playing, Here Were Dragons, these were characters that were too complicated and too janky and too unbalanced and all of the other things that people say about early Exceed for me to pay attention to. That is not true. A lot of these characters rule. Go check them out,
Hmm.
even if you are not looking specifically for a Wagner alike. These characters are cool. Go watch our videos on them. We have a lot of very good ones, and a lot of really cool characters are sitting overlooked in early Exceed.
Yeah, it's still Exceed, and yeah, have a good time with it. Which of course that's the
Presumably,
lesson
if
of the
you
law.
are an hour and 55 minutes into a lesson on an Exceed character, you like the game decently enough, and there are characters that you probably haven't played up here. Um, but yeah, D, this was great. I feel like I am now ready to go back and play a game with you again against maybe not Carmine, but maybe some other characters with Wagner. So thank you so much for the information and for the time. Um, I just saw. I think I just saw another character pop into your hand. Do you have another character
Oh,
to call out?
oh, no, no, no. I was going to show you this after because this is just the hold up, that's not the right one. Is this it? Yeah, yeah. Anyway, this is the other Wagner. But that's anyway. Ignore that. Nobody saw that.
What are we doing here, D?
No, no, no. That's not part of the lesson. Move on. Move on.
Okay. No, yeah, all
Explain
right.
nothing.
Yeah, now that we have that to lord over our viewers' heads, thank you so much for your time, D. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for the information and
My
for the
pleasure.
lack
My
of
pleasure.
information, frankly.
Yes,
Um,
yes. Know nothing
really
more.
looking forward to putting some of this stuff into practice. Hope our viewers have learned something as well. Hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you all for the next one.
Yeah.
Goodbye,
Have
everybody.
fun. Play neutral. Drink water. It's good for you. Stay hydrated.
Please drink water. Bye, everybody.
Bye.